I remember in 2005, I had a PlayStation Magazine subscription, and between the articles and the eventual demo disc allowing you to explore Coney Island, I discovered a game called The Warriors. And I was so excited for this release, I begged my mom to get it for me for Christmas that year because I loved San Andreas and Rockstar never seemed to miss. And so adapting their formula to a 1970s New York seemed ripe for quality. And I still remember sneaking around late at night to grab the presents, shake them under the tree, and see what could be inside, finding a perfectly exposed corner to let loose and a Rockstar logo unveiling itself beneath the wrapping. For that next month, I lived in a pure state of nirvana knowing that I would eventually get to play this game, and it was right around the corner. So I have really great memories playing the Warriors. Late at night with my brother, we would just go round after round in arcade mode. And I also remember the many times I explored every inch of the levels, marking all the graffiti tags, finishing all the bonus objectives. And least to say, I have a lot of love for this game, both for its technical reasons and my nostalgia. And so I revisited it this week to see how it holds up yet again to these standards. I'm very excited to be talking about the Warriors. And before we dive in, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts and have your support on future videos along the way. To dive first into the game's details and histories, it originally released October of 2005, right a couple months before Christmas, as I was mentioning. And the developer was Rockstar Toronto, so they're part of Rockstar Games, of course, who is known for the Grand Theft Auto series, Bully, Red Dead Redemption. But specifically Rockstar Toronto was more of like a co-developer and supporting studio. They co-developed a number of MS-DOS titles, and then they also worked on some ports for the games like Oni and Max Payne, getting them onto consoles. But the Warriors was going to be their first step out on their own. And of course, behind them was going to be their publisher, Rockstar Games, supporting them. And so overall, in the months and years kind of leading up to the release of this title, there wasn't too much in the world of controversies, development challenges, etc. They had a very clean run. They got the game out and got it done. And it released to some pretty solid acclaim overall and good reception. But it seems like over the years, people have kind of forgotten that the Warriors exist, which really hurts my soul because it's one of my favorite Rockstar titles. And so overall, just a very simple process. I did think it was interesting that Rockstar went with renderware as their engine for developing the Warriors. Renderware being kind of this general use development engine that was very popular during the PlayStation 2 era for creating games. And I just thought when I was researching this a little bit that Rockstar was probably using something more in-house for their titles at the time. But enough rambling about the game overall. Let's talk about my experience playing this game recently. I mean, it's been now 20 years that I have kind of grown up and played this game time and again. But it has been a few years now since I last picked up the title and even just explored it a little bit. So on the story side, the game begins well before the events of the 1979 film The Warriors, which this game is based off of. And the game really takes to introducing each of the 9 warriors and how they came to join the gang and the events leading up to the big meeting and the subsequent fallout of that meeting. So Rockstar really took a lot of time to flesh out these characters and give them unique personalities, unique gameplay styles, such as the movesets and fights that they use throughout the course of the game. And as well, kind of give them the opportunity to have their own missions where you play as them and get to know them as characters. So I thought that was a really cool way in which they adapted the story. Instead of going for like, let's take the movie and create a licensed movie game that covers an hour and a half of content and stretch it over 8. They just decided to build on that, and I really think they succeeded in a lot of ways in that respect. As the story progresses, you complete missions that build the gang's reputation, also get the opportunity to explore rival turf, and engage in a number of escalating conflicts that kind of lead up to and create a history with some of the gangs that you'll interact with following the meeting as well. So, and then midway, the tone shifts dramatically. There's this huge meeting, some bad stuff goes down, and I'll try to keep it brief, in not get into the weeds of the game story because, it might be a 45-year-old story from the period of the movie, but I still want you to have the opportunity to enjoy it in case you're not so familiar with it all. But you are in a situation where your home base that you've been using throughout the course of the game to kind of use as a headquarters and step out into Coney and explore around in kind of a safety zone. That's no longer accessible and not available to you. So you're forced to survive mission after mission while trying to get back to Coney Island. And this change in pace, I think for me, is a brilliant reflection of this film's kind of core tension. Works super well when shifting the game into this style of play. So yes, the story is linear, but I think in a lot of ways stays deeply immersive. It's got a really strong mission variety with a number of character-driven moments where every one of the warriors who are part of the main cast, they really get to shine and be their own person, something that I don't think you get as much when you watch the movie of the Warriors. And not only this, but the game does a really good job of capturing this kind of streetwise tone of the original film while expanding on it with new interactions and gang dynamics. So I really liked those aspects of the game. Not only that, but digging into the layers of the game's themes and surrounding narrative, you know, there's a lot of emphasis put on loyalty, survival, kind of this urban decay that is woven throughout the course of the game. And with the entire game taking place at night, kind of reinforces its gritty, crime-ridden atmosphere. And I love this about it. You know, there's a lot of narratives about 1970s New York, and not only did the movie and a number of movies actually really take advantage of that narrative, but also this game really puts it in stone. And I like that about it because the original Warriors movie is kind of like graphic book-esque. It's more comic with like all of these gangs, and they dress up in their costumes and they prowl around the streets that they're from, and then they fight each other in these big street brawls. You know, not particularly realistic to real life, but it was perfect for a video game world. And so I think that the story and its narrative and kind of the world building that Rockstar is committed to throughout the course of it is just so cool. I think that they really had a solid foundation to work off of, but they also had the right people to continue building on that foundation. And honestly, you know, Rockstar faced a really unique challenge with the Warriors. I don't know when I was a kid and the game came out in 2005, if 20 years after the film's release, if it was anything more than a cult classic. Like, you weren't making a game for Marvel fans, where every single Marvel fan was going to have a very rabid opinion about the characters, what the characters do throughout the course of the game, etc. So maybe Rockstar had a little more leeway there. But not only did they have to recreate the film's atmosphere in a 3D world, but they had to build out an entire prequel narrative that, you know, wasn't present in the film at all. And so that meant, you know, crafting these full backstories again for these characters and creating their own movesets and really writing out their personalities, how they were recruited. And they crushed this aspect of the game just out of the park, and you would have never known that a lot of this was not canon to the film or the book it's based on, which is, again, a short book just mostly about this meeting and this fight for survival that the Warriors go through. And so overall, I love the game's narrative and pace. It really feels cohesive, and it's really as if the developments are truly leading up to this night, this big meeting, and its aftermath in a satisfying way. It's something that really takes you on a journey from beginning to end, and you feel like you can't really piece out where was Rockstar, where was the original book, where were the original movies. And I really thought they did a fantastic job here. I think that the story is really fun, and not only I spoke a lot about the characters, the Warriors themselves, but the people that they meet along the way. The hi-hats, the orphans, the mute baseball Furies. I mean, they all have so much personality, whether they speak or not. And they all have like this main chieftain, war chief, I guess is what they call it in the Warriors, that kind of lead their crew. And you interact with a lot of these people, and they're so well written, and they're so unique in their personality. And Cobb, for example, is the baseball Furies war chief. Hey, he doesn't even say a word. And I know his name, and I know what he looks like and his personality, and it's something I remember decades after playing this game. And so that's awesome, and Rockstar just did a fantastic job here. That's enough about story. Let's talk about the actual gameplay, because gameplay is what's really driving video gaming, I think, in a lot of ways. So kind of structurally, the core gameplay loop I found to be pretty addictive. You start with a story mission, and that can be very dynamic in what you are setting out to do throughout the course of the story. Sometimes it's going with your crew, and bombing up some trains. Other times it's going to another neighborhood and beating up this gang who's been talking crap about you. So that's always really very dynamic. But what happens between the story missions is you'll return to the Warriors hangout in Coney Island, and you can train, such as doing push-ups or combos on the punching bag that will increase your stats marginally over the course of the game. You'll also spend time exploring Coney Island, doing some bonus objectives around there, and those will allow you to unlock some new upgrades, new vendors. It's really a satisfying rhythm that builds momentum over the course of the game and gives you an opportunity to really just, if you want to stop playing for the night, you're good, or if you want to take a break and you want to explore around and do something more casual, like just break into stores and steal radios and beat up people on the streets, that's totally an option that the game provides to you. And I really liked that, though it's not completely open world like Grand Theft Auto might have been, it still retains some of that sandbox element to it by allowing you to interact with the mechanics in that way. And speaking of mechanics, combat is super fluid. It's combo driven, with each character kind of offering different styles. So Ajax, he's really just like a brawler, and he's throwing mostly like boxing punches. But then there's Cochise, who's using a lot more of his legs and doing karate kicks and stuff like that. So every character is slightly different, but the actual way in which you use them, with the light attack, strong attack, grapple, it's all very easy and fluid and fun to interact with. But there are some mechanics that I do think kind of feel clunky, especially on the Xbox controller as I was playing it in this instance. So blocking, for instance. Blocking requires using the jelly bean buttons. I don't know what they're called, but I'm going to call them that, gems. Ivory ebony buttons. I mean, there's a lot of names for these. Maybe there was an actual technical term, but I like jelly beans, so we're going to call them jelly beans. But anyways, one of the block button is on one of these jelly beans, and it's kind of awkwardly placed. So if you are fighting and you're doing light, strong, and then you want to block, it's kind of a funky way in which you have to position your hand to do that. So I felt like it was more of an afterthought than being some kind of strategic tool that you could use in the middle of a fight. And especially when you get on harder difficulties, blocking is going to be helpful to you. It's not going to be make it or break it in terms of whether you use it or not, but it is going to be useful if you have that in your arsenal of things you can do. And overall, I would say the combos too require an appropriately placed kind of timing of the button presses to pull off, and things like animations activating. Say you knock a character over and they fall on the ground, you might have to wait a second before you can actually kick them or so on, instead of actually punching the air. Things like that can really trigger some unintended movements. So these are things you'll learn the more you play and the better you get at working around the game. But certainly things that, if you haven't played the Warriors before, are worth kind of taking note of. Like, this is going to happen to you and is part of the way in which the game is to be experienced. It's just part of that process. So the next thing I wanted to touch on was kind of navigation and world design. So New York is surprisingly expansive in this game. You'll go all throughout New York, ride in the trains, and go into different boroughs for the missions. And while you're there, you can mug pedestrians, you can break into stores, you can steal car radios. And even in Coney Island, there's a side quest in which you feed these like picky homeless people who only want a donut or only want a hot dog. And I thought this was pretty funny. It's kind of like being a 1970s DoorDash driver, something that's kind of oddly delightful. And exploring every level to kind of uncover its secrets is a lot of fun and feels very casual in the sense of, you're not really rushed through these levels as the player to get to the end, which I really liked. And throughout the course of your crime, you'll collect money, which then you can use to buy spray paint. You can go bomb some tags of the rival gangs, which kind of usually contribute to bonus objectives. Or buy flash, which is the healing item in the game. All these things are very much in a satisfying loop of, you get to a mission and you want to collect some of these items, so you go around and you commit some crime, and then you get the items you need, and so on and so forth. And I really liked that. It was a very fun and fluid back and forth. Last couple things I want to touch on in the gameplay space is UI and interaction. I think this stuff is really important. So menus, I would say, are functional and not necessarily flashy. And one of the things that stood out to me is issuing commands on the Xbox buttons. I have to say that this felt, again, a little less intuitive than it did on PlayStation 2. And that's because when you are issuing commands, you have to click the left analog stick down, and then you have to choose the command that you want with the right analog stick, which does, for me, disrupt a little bit of the movement and the flow during combat. Not as bad as if you're like running around and you issue a command, or standing still, of course. But if you're moving left or right and you're fighting somebody actively and you want to issue to the warriors, hey, my health is low, come watch my back, instead of just wrecking everybody. It's a little tougher to do that in the moment than it should be. But otherwise, the UI is pretty minimal. It's just, you get a little score box, which will show you as well your spray paint and your flash count. But the actual buildup of rage, which unlocks special combos, and your health is shown on a little health bar below your character's feet that will come in when you are in the middle of fighting and such. And I really do like these elements, because what they do is they give you an opportunity to immerse yourself more in the world, and they disappear when they don't need to be there. And then they show up when they do, and it's not in a way that takes you away from the action. Such as, if you are focused on the fighting, it's really great that the health is right below your character's feet, because you are not having to look up to the top left corner, top right corner or something, and take your eyes away from that action in order to see, like, hey, am I on the brink of dying? Do I need to heal? And that is something that, for me, allowed me to interact and react very quickly if I did need to do some kind of action of that nature. So, you know, in some places, I would say the Xbox controller's scheme didn't hold up too well for me compared to the PlayStation 2's version. I think the Xbox version looks better and plays better functionally overall. But many of the other dynamics of fighting in this game are as expected, and I've kind of laid those out. So I really love exploring in the Warriors, and the fighting system is so cool, and it's really fun to play as different characters just to see how they play. And even if you go to the arcade mode, those characters also have special movesets at times, which I found to be very impressive, and you don't even play as them throughout the course of the game. So I consistently still felt challenged playing this game even after all these years, and you know, overall just had so much fun engaging with the systems. Just a blast of a game. What can I say? Really quick, just to touch on the game's auditory experience. Let's talk first about voice acting. So there are solid performances throughout this game. The game does benefit a lot from Rockstar's internal development team and talent pool. A lot of these folks worked on the GTA series prior in providing their voice talent, and that comes through here in the game as well. But one thing that was really cool was the game also features a number of the voice actors, well, the actual actors, I guess, reprising their roles from the original 1979 film of The Warriors, and this adds another layer of authenticity to the experience, which I thought was really cool, that they decided to reach out to those actors and get them to come back and play those roles in the game. And I'm sure those actors too were thrilled to do it, because in a lot of ways it allows for this legacy to live on of the Warriors, which I thought was super cool. So sound effects as well, punches, sirens, ambient city noise are all super gritty and effective and continue to drive an immersive experience for the game. And you just get a great audio mix throughout that's well balanced with clear dialogue and impactful effects. And another thing I didn't think would stand out to me too much, but we don't really see too often in games nowadays, is a soundtrack that is stand out because of its licensed tracks. There's a number of tracks that are presented in this game that are also in the original movie that add again to this layer of just connecting the two worlds to each other, even though they are decades apart. And I really did like that. And there is a nice original composition that's layered into that, evokes the era perfectly and doesn't detract from the feeling of New York in the 1970s, but adds an extra layer to it, which I appreciated a lot. And I just thought, just kind of sits in the background and makes me feel part of the world and doesn't take me away from it, unless it needs to, with those very special and cool licensed tracks that they mix in throughout. Finally, just want to comment on the visual, graphics, and style of this game by 2005 standards, of course. So 2005, The Warriors looks great. The character models, they show damage after fights and they retain it throughout cutscenes. Just something I thought was always really cool, that there's a continuity to it, and you know, something I don't see in too many games, I guess. And for 2005, just felt revolutionary in a lot of ways. But this extends to the world as well, such as if you'll revisit a couple areas throughout the course of the game, and if you laid graffiti down on a tag the last time you were there, it stays on the walls when you revisit the area. And the nighttime lighting, just this added moody realism. I think it is all super cool, the way in which they approach the artistic appeal of this game. And surely the night kind of hides some of the age, but I think the game aged very well overall. You can tell the 3D models are a little stiff. and the world is, of course, it's not a 4K game, but it just honestly looked great to me. That said, there are a couple things that I found strange. Maybe this was an Xbox specific thing because I couldn't remember it being an issue on the PlayStation 2, but some of the textures, especially tags, they kind of blend into the environment too much. It makes it a lot harder to spot on the Xbox version than I remember on the PlayStation 2. Glad that my memory held up pretty well because I could find most of them just based on the world and what I remembered of the game. But for new players, especially if they're playing the Xbox version, this might present kind of a weird challenge that I didn't expect. But overall, I think this doesn't detract from the game's world, and it still looks great in a lot of ways. All in all, as you can hear, I have a lot of praise for the Warriors. I think the game is just quality. It's tailored. It's a craftsman's work of a video game, and for some reason, by today's standards, a hidden gem. It's one that I think everybody should go out there and play, because it is a game that goes above and beyond just being a simple movie adaptation in a lot of ways. You know, Rockstar didn't just recreate the film, they expanded its universe. They gave depth to the characters, and they built a gameplay loop that's both fun and rewarding. And I especially appreciated the little design touches. You know, maybe you're in a world and you beat up a guy and you pick up his hat and boom, now you have a baller hat on. Or you find a boombox on the ground, you pick it up and you're walking through the streets and you can hear the licensed track playing. You see your character brutalized and bloodied in cutscenes, or you're watching the gang scatter during a hide command when a police raid happens and you're in a store robbing jewels. There's just some rough edges. You know, the controls in the Xbox feel a little less intuitive than on the PlayStation 2, and certain mechanics like blocking or kind of navigating tight spaces, these could all use refinement. But overall, it's a fluid and engaging system that holds up remarkably well to this game. And I'll just say that this game, for me, represents the core of fun. You know, I think fun is something that we don't get so much in video games anymore. It's kind of like a secondary thought. You know, a lot of people seem to think that video games need to be HBO, Showtime experiences where they're super dramatic and they're more like a movie. You know, the player can like set their controller down for 15 minutes. And this used to be something that we would joke about with the Metal Gear Solid games, where it's like, you're not even playing the game at this point. You're just watching Snake crawl through a microwave tunnel for 5 minutes as he getting like cooked alive. And then you get to the ending, and then now you are really just setting down the controller, and it's been an hour and a half and the credits still haven't rolled, you know? This used to be something that we would laugh about, and it's totally fine for games to be that way, and I love the Metal Gear Solid games for it. But games never emphasize new concepts, new ideas, new IPs, fun. How can we just make it exciting for you to see a group of enemies? Well, what if we make it to where you can sprint at them and then you can dive sideways like you're in a freaking WWE special? It's just something that in the mid-2000s developers seemed only capable of, and we've kind of moved beyond that. But for me, the Warriors is the representation of everything fun in a game. It has very tight game mechanics. It's a unique and fresh concept. It's really, you can see that there was a lot of heart from the developers put into not only adapting a cult classic, but building on it, enhancing its world, its lore. And so in a lot of ways, this is a game that you absolutely need to play. If you haven't, I don't know why you're waiting. Go play the game. But final remarks, I did want to say, I would have loved to have seen a sequel or even just a new IP entirely that built on these mechanics, especially kind of this crime economy, these gang dynamics. They're all really cool and fantastic for the 3D brawler space. And you know, 3D brawlers, just brawlers in general nowadays, are kind of few and far in between. And so the Warriors, in my mind, still remains one of Rockstar's most underrated gems. And if you're into that gritty kind of beat 'em up and strong narrative flair out of your video games, then it's absolutely worth visiting or revisiting if you haven't played it in a lot of years. So definitely go check it out. But otherwise, I want to know if you share my strong opinions on the Warriors as well. Please share your comments and thoughts below. I'd love to hear what you think. And again, just want to reiterate that if you like this video, please like the video and subscribe. Would love to have you join this small community and share your thoughts on these games and hear a little bit about what I'm playing these days. Maybe get inspired to try something new or visit a classic that you haven't in a while. Well, until next time, stay well, stay healthy. Look forward to seeing you all again, guys. All right, peace.